Thank you very much, Michael. I'm pleased first, before I take us through the presentation that we have, introduce my colleague, Sandy Okoth. Maybe he can say something small about himself. He has accepted that I will do the presentation and then he will take all your questions. So I'm very thankful to him.
So as you heard, my name is Sandy Okoth. I work with Jackson and I work for WWF Regional Sustainable Investments Program. And we are here to present on sustainable finance as a driver to the green economy, linking it to the CIS session that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Strategically, my friend has decided to put this presentation at the end so that it can summarize everything finance and link it to the other part of nature. And I'm pleased to actually share with you a little bit of some concepts that Michael has already alluded to, but try as much as possible to show the link between finance and nature. And many of us actually have asked us questions outside and inside. So what is it? What is the link between finance and nature and natural resource management? And why are you here as a conservation organization? We will attempt to respond to this question. And I hope by the end of this, we will actually shake hands and say, now we see, because I am sure we will. So basically looking at what the concept of green economy is all about. Green, blue economy, you've had. Kenya will be hosting actually a blue economy conference, a global blue economy conference in November this year. And basically blue and green are one and almost the same thing, but it is a concept that is actually used to look at results, or rather what results into improved human well-being and social equity, but at the same time significantly reducing environmental risks and ecological scarcity. And I know as a finance sector, you understand when you talk about risk a little bit better. Blue economy tries to adopt the same concept, but now within the marine environment. Blue always means marine. And it basically talks about a sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, jobs, and of course the ocean health. So most of these terms have been used by different institutions at different times, but you will realize that they have common terms: improved livelihoods, social well-being, sustainable use, among others. So when it comes to green growth, which is also the other additional component of green economy, you realize that it is actually a similar concept to green economy, but tries to underscore the use of green policies to be able to drive economic development. And if you look at what Kenya has agreed to derive what we locally can interpret as green economy, it is that is low carbon, resource efficient, equitable, and inclusive socio-economic transformation. And this is demonstrated very well in the National Green Economy Strategy and Implementation Plan 2016 to 2030, which tries to look at the Kenya's Vision 2030 and look at the programs within the Vision 2030 and looks at the different scenarios of making choices in terms of following the different development paths towards getting to that ambition. This strategy tries to define a path that is low carbon, that is more or less pollutant, that uses resources efficiently, more equitably, more inclusive, towards transforming our economy. And when you look at the various thematic areas of focus, you will appreciate that these are areas which I think in many ways touch on some of the areas that we've made reference to in the last 2 days. Sustainable infrastructural development, the development of infrastructure, investment in energy. The last presentations were talking about the agricultural sector. Are we investing in those activities within the agricultural sector that at the end of the day will make it difficult for us to continue getting any produce out of the land by using methods or financing methods that will ensure that we can only have productivity from this land, for example, in the next 10 years and thereafter we have none? Or we are looking at financing agricultural activities or equipment that ensure that we continue getting produce out of this piece of land for the future within the sustainable concept of development. Sustainable natural resource management, the use of our fisheries. Of course, agriculture also comes in there in form of soil, water, wildlife, land use, and extractive industries. What are we financing within this natural resource sector? People will be coming to you as the finance sector to, for example, develop tourism lodges in some of our conservation areas or near our conservation areas. Some of them have been proposed strategically in some areas which are breeding areas or habitats for specific endangered species of wildlife or plants. It will not exist. Building resilience, our ability to respond and to have shocks on any pressures that may be either economic or social or environmental in nature. In Kenya now, many of us have read in the papers, if you are not from this country, there have been a lot of efforts to remove illegal structures on what we call riparian land. Land that is supposed to be reserved by law, and it is there very clear, but the finance sector, maybe by not knowing, but also looking at the environmental impact assessment, ticking the box and saying we've seen the approval. But what has happened? We've lost all our investments that we have put along those areas. Not to say that the approvers were right. It was an illegality, maybe. But here we find ourselves, bad debts and so forth. Is it a risk that we want to take as the finance sector? Issues of resource efficiency. We are in this building, we are in the equator, where lighting is served for free for 12 hours. But we keep our lights on because our architects have ensured that we have no windows on this side, on that other side. Yeah, is it good use of resources? But as finance sector, we continue asking, so how much are you saying you want? And how many years are you going to repay? And then we go into our back rooms, ensure that we have our figures reading well. There are the resources. Is it good resource use? At the end of the day, where is the source of this energy? We start looking out and saying hydropower that is available in the country that may be renewable is not sufficient. Geothermal is not sufficient. So what next? Coal. Coal, people are running away from it. We are running into it. Simply because we want to ensure that we take care of those walls that have no light coming into our room. Social inclusion, I think inclusivity in the finance sector is a discussion that has been going on, and I think even the governor did make reference to. For us as an organization, we look at the finance sector, providers of funds. We look at the regulators up there, playing a role in ensuring that they provide an enabling environment for the finance sector to do what it knows it does best. We have influencers, advisors in many ways to how finances are channeled through that system. We have lenders, we have project finance, insurance covers, and so forth, somewhere in the middle as part of the products of that system, which go into the use of funds that have an impact on nature in one way. And let me give you a very good example. In the infrastructure sector, the construction of large infrastructure like railway lines. We have a big debate in the country. The railway line cutting through Nairobi National Park, it gets money from somewhere to succeed. There are safeguards that have been put by many financial institutions. Even countries do have safeguards in form of environmental impact assessments and maybe more advanced safeguards and so forth. Have we even drawn a red line to say that if it is going beyond this, we are not going to finance? I remember last year during the meeting hosted by President Macron in France, the climate summit. Many of the financial institutions actually and development finance institutions made a declaration that up to a certain time, I think in the next few years, they are going to exit financing coal, and there were even announcements around some European countries exiting from motor vehicles driven from petroleum-related products. You've heard about that? Just to be able to contribute towards reducing the warming of the earth by reducing our carbon emissions. Last year, and this year, there have been a lot of discussions about coal power plants in Kenya and in Africa. And many financial institutions, some of them have already pulled out of financing it because of possible implications. So you can see the relationship between those who are providing, those who are advising. If they can provide and we advise as asset consultants that it may not be the best investment, because if you look at the risk of climate change, this is likely to happen, then maybe we can be able to manage how we invest in some of the sectors that are more risky. So integrating risk in our decision making as investment managers, for example, or as the banking sector. At the moment, there is a discussion within the country, Kenya in this case. The Kenya Bankers Association, among other partners, are leading, and FSD Africa, FMO, the Central Bank, and many other partners are discussing the Kenya Green Bonds Program, which is going to lead to an issuance possibly of a green bond or green bonds that will be asking for money with the aim of investing in green projects. That is the one way in which we as a finance sector can contribute in shaping how development can go to that direction of being green. So when you look at green finance as a driver of sustainability, you appreciate that it actually comes out of the realization of the need to account for social and environmental issues in development, and also recognizing social and environmental issues in the mix of financial sector risks or other credit risks. It also tries to bridge the gap between development and environment with the appreciation that there is no way we can avoid interacting with nature in our development. So it is looking for that particular balance that also deals with long-term and short-term benefits. And this takes you to a very old debate, but at the same time current, in terms of global agreement on the concept of sustainability as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. And this is the basis of the Millennium Development Goals that came and went. We now have 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And part of the parallel discussions towards these goals were actually one for the finance sector. How the finance sector can actually catalyze the achievement of these Sustainable Development Goals, which all of us, private sector, public sector, non-state actors, have actually signed into globally to be able to deliver. So this, of course, allows us and gives us the reason to speak about the triple bottom line, balanced by the banking, the finance sector generally. It is a struggle between your profit, your environmental stewardship, and your ability to be able to touch people's lives. And I think this is where, and this is a language where many of us in the finance sector appreciate and maybe even have a closer link. But it is basically everything else that I've talked about. So the triple bottom line is actually a good summary of our requirement, or rather our requirements that we must make reference to every time we make any decisions around investments in the finance sector. I thank you and welcome you for any questions.
The green economy, how are you working with NEMA, for example, to ensure that no people in the country are actually living on private land or on wildlife? Because right now, when you look at the national park in Nairobi, we have a railway line that is actually cutting through.
Last work stream was around strategic environment assessment, the environmental audits, and what we did, we went through a process of changing the regulations, because the regulation had so many gaps. So we used to have contractors just doing what they do, business as usual, but there was no backstop through, a form of regulation. So we went around the country and we are in the process of having the regulations signed off. The regulations have been done and they are with the ministry. So in terms of trying to prevent, those kinds of developments, what we are saying is that now we have a regulation to refer to, and all these things are stipulated in there. I don't know if Jackson wants to add.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to what Sandy has said, I think the responsibility of implementation of the environmental law is actually more than NEMA. What we've also done, in addition to what Sandy has said, this time the regulations will have a code of conduct, and it is NEMA that is leading this process and the ministry. It will have a code of conduct for environmental impact assessment experts. Because one of the biggest problems that we've been having is actually people not providing professional advice to clients. They do it because you pay them. But I believe with what has been happening in the past few months, where responsibility now is going to individuals in form of public officers or private citizens, I think this is going to change. So that as a client, for example, if you ask for an environmental impact assessment report, you should be ready to take a negative or a positive advice. And on the other part, the person giving the advice must be like a doctor. They tell you you are sick and you are sick. Or you are not feeling well and you are not feeling well. Or you are well and you are well. So it is actually taking advantage of those new regulations to fill in the gaps that exist. And also the provision that gives an opportunity for citizens to take on even government institutions. Like, for example, there are cases in court, even against public institutions like NEMA, for making the wrong decisions. there is a public, what used to be the Public Complaints Committee. The Constitution has even provided for an environment, land and environment court to deal with specifically environment and land matters. And environment has been given as one of the basic human rights, a clean and healthy environment, which has never been the case in the country. So we have even more power and more responsibility as citizens to raise issues whenever they are not being done.